Hi, this is Steve Palladino from Palladino Power Project. And what I'm going to do with this video is show you a way where you can customize your interval targets. It's a simple way. Now that all Stryd users have a power duration curve to refer to, um, it becomes a viable option if you wish to customize your power targets. Now, there are other ways of customizing, and there's things like WKO optimized intervals, but I'm going to show you a simple way using your power duration curve. Now, I don't have Power Center, I don't access it, um, but I do use WKO, and it's pretty much similar concept in that you have your mean maximal power curve or power duration pairs here in yellow, and on yours they're in blue and gray, different colors on Power Center. And then you have the model, which I'm going to just hover here. And you can see that's the model. That's the more smooth line that you'll see on your Stryd Power Center. So what I'm going to be doing is referring to the model. And that's what you're going to use as your reference point, is the model. So I'm going to switch images here, or charts. This is the model. The red line is the model. And what I've done is simply thrown in a 95% of the model, which you can see parallels the model exactly. It's in yellow. And then on either side of it is a plus or minus 1%, so 94 to 96%. Now, you're not going to be able to do this in Stryd Power Center, but you can do the math basically. And so let me demonstrate. So um, in this case, actually, let me do one aside. When you're near FTP, you're pretty close to FTP. Going by percentage of FTP works really well. It works very reliable across individuals as creating power targets. But as you drift further to the left, you pick up more anaerobic contribution to the power that you're making as a maximal effort. And because of that, it varies more. So actually, let me do this. I'm going to show you a chart. This is actually developed by Dr. Coggin, and it's usually using cycling data, but it is probably pretty reflective of running data, maybe with a little less individual variation at the extremes here. But that said, if you look here, what we're looking at is the percent of FTP on the y-axis and the duration here. And I've marked off roughly where FTP lies. And what we have is we have error bars. We have the mean and the variance here. And this is in a large population of cycling athletes. And you can see that when we're looking at percentage of FTP, when we're close to FTP, the variance is very small across athletes. But as you drift left in the power duration curve, you get more variance. You might have one athlete that's up here, another athlete that's down here. And so the appropriate power target as a percentage of FTP becomes less applicable as you move left. So for those shorter duration efforts, it becomes more prudent to individualize your power targets based on your power duration curve, your model. And this really, in my experience, this starts happening as you start getting beyond about 105% or more. It starts happening up in here. So with that chart, let me come back. And so again, we're going to use the model, your power duration model curve in Stryd Powercenter. And what you're going to look for is 95% of that power for a particular duration. So let's say we're doing 5-minute intervals. All right, 5-minute intervals, we can see, looking in the legend up in the upper left there, the curve power, the modeled power is 323 watts. 95% of that is 307 watts. And if you go a percent on either side, the range is 104 to 304 to 310 watts. So your target is 307 with a power range or target range of 304 to 310. If you're doing 10-minute intervals, you're going to take 95% of the modeled power. So in this case, again, you look at that legend, 315 watts is the power duration curve number, the modeled number for 10 minutes. 95% of that, the target is 299 watts. And the range is from 296 to 302. Now, I arbitrarily, the 95% works pretty good. I arbitrarily went 1% below, 1% above as a pretty reliable range for most athletes. Some athletes can do 95%, do intervals at 97% or even higher. But for the most part, 95% plus or minus 1% should be your target. So this is how you do it. Say, okay, the prescription calls for 2-minute intervals. The curve says 345 on your Stryd Powercenter, and you're looking at the model curve. It says 345, and you just do the math. 95% of that is 328 watts, and the range is plus or minus 1%. 324 to 331 watts is a target range. So let me illustrate this, how it works out with an athlete that I did a prescription. I prescribed by percentage of FTP. That's the way I prescribe most of them. The prescription was, it was a progressive power workout. So it's 1 times 8 minutes, 2 times 5 minutes, 2 times 2 minutes. And the 8 minutes were near threshold intervals, 98 to 100% of FTP. The 5-minute intervals were at super threshold, 100 to 102% of FTP. The 2-minute intervals were targeting more max aerobic and were prescribed as 103 to 105% of FTP. So translating this particular athlete's FTP value, the range, as you apply it, as you do the math, for the 8-minute, it's 299 to 305. And this is just based on the percentage of FTP. This is just, what's the FTP? This is the percentage of it. And the 5 minutes, 305 to 311. The 2-minute is 314 to 320 based on this prescription up above. However, if I went back and looked at this, the 8-minute is 298 to 304. the primary target's 301, right? If I'm customizing this based on the power duration curve. The 5-minute interval, I just scroll over to 5 minutes, take 95% of that, that's 307 watts with a range of 304 to 310. That's a plus or minus 1%. All right? And the 2-minute becomes 328 watts, that's 95% of 345, with a range of 324 to 331 watts. That's the target range. All right, so that's, you take your model, you scroll over for that duration, for the interval duration that is being called for, and then you just do the math, 95% plus or minus 1%. All right, so let's go back and see how this compares. So the model that I just went through, basing on the model and not just a percentage of FTP. So again, if I go back, it's going off of the model, not just anchored to one point. It's based on whatever the model happens to be. All right. So in this case, based on percentage of the anchor point, the FTP, this is the range for the 8 minutes, 299 to 305. If you go by the model, you hover over 8 minutes and take 95% of that, that's 301 with a range of 298 to 304. If you look at that, it's not that much different. Why? Because it's down here in this range. It's really close to FTP, so there isn't a lot of variance from person to person. This is, the next one is the 5 minutes. So based on the FTP as a single anchor point, 100 to 102% of that, that's 305 to 311 watts. All right. If we go by the model, we hover over 5 minutes and look at the model, take 95% of that, that's 307 with a range of 304 to 311. Again, that's not that different. Not that different at all. But now as we're getting into the shorter duration, the 2 minutes, and we look at this, this is a percentage of FTP, 103 to 105%. Anchor point, single anchor point, gives you 314 to 320 watts. All right, if we go to the 2 minute and hover over that on the model, take 95% of that, it gives you 328 with a range of 324 to 331. So now, as we're drifting left on that power duration curve, we can see that the target based on a single point, the FTP, becomes a little less individualized. This is more individualized for that particular person. So the model gives you the capacity to customize your interval targets a little bit better in the way that I showed, by, again, going to your model and looking at whatever that target is. So I'm going to go to the extreme here. Let's say we're doing 30-second intervals. The curve, the model, says 370 is the max. We're taking 95% of that, so 352 watts for a 30-second interval with a range of 348 to 355. So that's how it's used. Now let's look at the execution of this athlete, how the athlete executed this workout. Now realize that there is some, there's some determination of the actual execution based on the targets, right? So it's not just letting the athlete go freeform, but the athlete did go freeform a little bit. And so the athlete executed the workout, the 8-minute, at 301 watts. That works in both cases. And then the execution of the 5-minute intervals were 309, 311 watts. Again, works pretty good. All right. Now we get into the 2-minute reps. The athlete executed 327 for the first one, 323 for the second one. So actually executed a little bit higher than this target range. And actually executed very, very close to this target range, which was this is the numbers individualized off of the athlete's power duration curve. So there you have it. There's the way that you can customize your interval targets. Go to your Stryd power duration curve, assuming that the curve is fairly valid, meaning you've done representative maximal efforts over the prior 90 days to make the curve valid, right? So if you go to that curve, now you can customize by going to the number of minutes that you're supposed to be doing your work intervals at, and taking 95% plus or minus 1% of whatever your curve value is. Now, that's all I had for this particular, is how to customize the target based on a given duration. So if you're given a certain duration, you can customize the target in that way. So it's basically figuring out what the intensity is for this work interval. The duration has to be given. We're not giving you that leeway in terms of customization here with this particular video. It's just figuring out what the intensity is if you give the duration. The same thing, we're not going to go into the recovery duration for that particular interval or the intensity. That's a whole nother ball game, whole nother video. But at least what I've been able to demonstrate is how to use your Stryd power duration curve model to actually provide you a customization of your interval targets. Hopefully this helps, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.